man, I can't believe I got this thing stuck. Had to call John. Man, I need a winch.
No worries, Brian. We're gonna make this so this never happens to you. Today on Tech Garage, we're gonna install a worn winch and we're gonna beef up the electrical system to handle it. Brian, let's get you back to the garage. Welcome to Tech Garage presented by Advance Auto Parts. Well, we got our Jeep cleaned up and made short work of getting it into the shop. But you know, we're gonna solve that problem so it never happens again. We're gonna install a worn winch on the front of this Jeep. Now with those worn winches also come amp draws. They draw a lot of electricity. So we're gonna go through the entire electrical system. We're even gonna upgrade this alternator to handle any way or shape you get this thing stuck in. And you also mentioned when you come over here, you hit a bump, that steering started shaking a little bit. They call that the death wobble. We have a dual steering stabilizer while we got it in here. We'll go ahead and install that. So Brian, you'll never have to call me again.
I can't believe I had to call him. You talk about wounded pride, I'm never going to hear the end of this. Now, anybody can install a winch, especially in today's winch technology and the hardware that comes with it, all of the engineering. It makes this extremely doable in your driveway. But you've got to get the installation right, not only so you're safe as this winch performs under extreme duress, but so that it's effective in getting you in or out of any kind of trouble you might be in. On the Jeep, we've got to remove the tow hooks. We're going to take off the access cover, and this isn't hard to get the front winch mounting plate installed. But a couple considerations you should make when you're installing any winch. Now, my dad taught me a long time ago to think about when you're installing a winch, do you want it at the front of the vehicle or at the back of the vehicle? Let's face it, if you're nose deep in mud or swampy ground, you may not want to pull the vehicle further through or further into that problem. Certainly with the right experience and the right hardware and the right tackle, you can regress with a front-mounted winch, but it's not always easy. On our project today, we're going to show you how our worn winch can be used at the back of the vehicle or at the front of the vehicle. It's going to be permanently mounted up here, but with a few bolts you can back it off, put it in the cradle, and it'll actually install in the rear receiver. You're going to like how that works. Now on the Jeep, we just have basic access to get to here. Cover pops off. You're looking at the sway bar mounts. We're going to remove the front bolts only on the sway bar mounts. We certainly have to take off our tow hooks, and we're ready for the worn winch mounting plate, which bolts right up, and we've got the foundation in place. I'm going to get started.
We got the good stuff. We got a worn power plant, 9.5. That's 9,500 pounds of line pull. And you got 125 feet of line to get the job done. So no matter what, you can pull out of any situation. And the really cool thing, it's got a multiple planetary gear set. Well, what does all that mean? That means massive gear reduction, 156 to 1. That's crazy. Think about it. It's nothing more than a starter motor. Our starter motor here has an armature, and then it spins the pinion. Well, our starter motor here is just the armature spinning the actual gear reduction. And what it is, a planetary gear set. This is pretty cool. You can see the little pinions inside of here, and these pinions actually rotate this ring gear out here, and then I use the sun gear. That's why it's called a planetary gear set, to get the job done as far as gear reduction is concerned. Now I can actually show you. I painted on here some white lines. Starter motor, perhaps I turn it around. That's 1, 2, we're counting the armature, 3, 4, and almost 5 and a little bit more to get it back around. That's 5 to 1. Think about 156 to 1. In order to do that, they also draw a lot of amperage. Now we're going to wire ours directly to the truck, so what we're going to have to do is beef up the system. Warren recommends about 650 cold cranking amps. Our batteries here, you can look at your battery, has 640 on this one. We're going to have to get a little bigger battery, so we'll put an Optima in that one. The plates determine the cranking size. More to come with that. We're also going to beef up the alternator. Now our alternator here, this one's about 120 amps. Factory was 80 amps. So that's going to make the battery work a little bit easier to get the job done. Now Warren supplied us with everything. Brian mentioned earlier, you want to pull it out backwards? Well, they gave us a mount right here that can go into a rear receiver. Just bolt it on there. You got a remote, so you don't have to stand in the mud. You can go ahead and pull it out that way. You got the hook, you got the winch, you got the actual compressor on there. So if you have any problems with air while you're out there, compressor will help you get the job done. But the first thing we need to do is we need to bolt our winch on here and then put it on the truck.
All right, John, I got the final bolt just about out. It's the sway bar mounting strap, front bolts only. They come out very easily. Let's go ahead and test fit that plate.
Yeah, that's always a good idea. Now this is a beefy plate right here. Now, very important that you look in the instructions. Warren gives you everything you need for this installation. But we had about 6 washers here and we're trying to figure out why. Looked at the instructions, real simple. There's a little step back there and you want to make sure for perfect fitment that you put them washers in so you don't have any kind of cattywomble winch.
Yeah, absolutely. You want all the integrity you can get on this plate. It's going to have a lot of stress and a lot of torque on it. So you don't want an air gap between the bottom of the mounting plate and the top of the frame rail. Put those washers in. There's 3 over here that are going to hold it. They go in very easily. This thing's easy to install.
It really is. This thing's all lined up. It's absolutely perfect. You know, now that it fits good, all we have to do is take it off, put it on the winch, and get the winch on the Jeep, and we'll do that as soon as we return with more Tech Garage.
When using a DVOM, how do you measure current flow in a circuit? A. Place the lead across the circuit. B. Place the leads in series with the circuit. C. Place one lead on the positive side and the other on the negative. Or D. Place the lead across the component with the power disconnected. The correct answer is B. Always place the leads in series with the circuit, or use an inductive amp probe when measuring amperage in a circuit. This edition of Tech Garage, presented by Advance Auto Parts, is being brought to you by Optima Batteries, powering your passion. Stage 8, the world's best locking fastener. Steel Rubber, quality crafted rubber parts and weather stripping. And by Advance Auto Parts. Let's get you back to the garage.
Welcome back to Tech Garage. You can see we've got the Warren winch mounting plate and the winch married up. 3 of the 4 bolts are in and they're torqued. You got to follow your torque specs here. You also want to follow the order of instructions in assembling this. You got to put the fair lead in first so you can get access to those bolts and get that good and tight and snug. Then the winch goes down into the cradle. Now I got to tell you, probably the most popular tool in the job so far today has been this extendable magnet. It allows me to get the square nut into tight quarters down here where it belongs. You can also see out to the side there, we've got a heavy gauge wire. So with the nut in place, the final bolt goes in, it grabbed. We'll torque this down properly. And the next consideration is the wiring. On our Jeep, Warren's provided us plenty of cable length here to get where we need to be. But if you have to modify or add to it for your vehicle, make sure you use the right gauge wire. It's critical not only for performance and safety of your system, your personal safety as well.
Now there's a reason why Warren uses a wire this thick on that winch, and I got a good demonstration to show you why. Got some circuits laid right here on the board so you can actually see. This one here is fuse protected, circuit number 1. And what I'm going to do is hook it up, and anytime you had a short circuit, which could happen with your winch, what's happening is the amps are going to bypass the actual circuit. They're going to run so fast, it's actually going to blow this fuse right here. So if we watch this fuse and I touch this instantaneously, that's going to pop. That's good. That's the weakest link. That's not going to burn the actual circuit itself. Our next circuit, if we move over to it, well, this one's protected by a circuit breaker. Now, circuit breaker is a resettable device. It's basically just going to open up with heat and then reclose. So I'll come over to this one here, and I'll short it once again, and this is going to happen. You see the lights go out, but if you wait a minute, it's cooled down. Once it cools down, the lights come back on. Now, here's the example I was talking about with the winch and why it's so important to keep that wire in good shape, because this one here is a fusible link. And just imagine, this is the winch wire right here, and then you go ahead and put a little wire in the middle of it. Not a good idea. That's a fusible link. That's designed to burn, but even on the winch, that's going to burn with enough amp flow. And if I come over right here, and I go from here, and I short this out, now remember, our Optima here is pushing out 750 cold cranking amps. That's more than enough to do the job. Those amps are going to run so fast and so much that it's going to burn this link right in half, and that's the weakest link, and I'll show you how that works. You don't want that to happen on the Jeep. I think Brian's calling. I better head over.
Before we set this winch in place, you want to put your spacer washers in place right on top of the sway bar mount. Got them stacked up right. Again, this is going to create level between the top of that bolt and the top of the bumper. That's important so we get a good fit. I got to tell you, this thing is a beast. You need a buddy to help you here. Hey, John, can you give me a hand?
Yeah,
Because
I got it. I know.
is heavy and awkward.
All right, why don't you take that?
Got that?
We'll see if we can get it. You ready?
All right, I'm ready. 1, 2, 3. All right. So we don't have to final fit it right now. I'm going to go ahead and try to run these wires.
All right, I'll hold it forward for you. You want to get the wires through the grill there?
Yep. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and use some openings we've got here and be opportunistic about this. You know, you could run the wires down under the vehicle to come back up to the battery, but why? You're potentially putting them in harm's way. We know we're gonna do some off-roading, so I'm gonna carefully run these.
Now, as you run them wires, it's really important, we just saw earlier, make sure you don't nick them or chafe them through any of this steel. You want to get some wire loom or some wire straps, tie them up, maybe find some existing wire harnesses, go with that, get it directly to the battery. You saw what happened. If it hits metal, that's a direct short, you're going to cause a fire. Also, you want to keep it away from any heat source. Heat, well, that causes resistance, and this motor needs a certain amount of voltage in amps, and if you got resistance, you're not going to get that, and that's going to cause a problem. Boy, this thing
really nice, right
fits
behind
like
the
a glove.
bumper guard.
Yep, I'm just gonna put these original hooks back on there, which is absolutely perfect. We'll go ahead and get this thing bolted up.
Bolt drops right into place. I love the fact that we can use the tow hooks we had on here.
Exactly, it's looking good, real good. Now, as I tighten this back up, we're gonna show you the amp draw, and you don't wanna miss that. We'll be right back with more Tech Garage presented by Advance Auto Parts.
Adding mechanical load to an electrical circuit, A, decreases resistance, B, increases amperage, C, decreases amperage, or D, decreases voltage. Find out the answer when we come back. Adding mechanical load to an electrical circuit, A, decreases resistance, B, increases amperage, C, decreases amperage, or D, decreases voltage. The correct answer is B. Adding mechanical load or mechanical resistance to electrical circuits increases amperage. Electrical resistance decreases amperage.
Welcome back to Tech Garage presented by Advance Auto Parts. Now we got our winch all bolted up and secured. The bolts are torqued to specifications according to the actual instructions. We ran the wire harness all the way back, tucked it in real nice, got it to our Optima battery, nice and clean and secure. We're ready to check that amp draw that I promised you earlier. Now, how are we gonna actually check an amp draw to a winch? I got an idea. We got this old VAT-40. Now, this is pretty cool because we can hook this up and we can watch the amps as we start pulling this. I'm gonna take the positive lead to this VAT-40, put the negative on first, that's even better. I'll put the negative on first, and then I'm gonna come over here and I'm gonna put the positive on. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this amp probe and I'm gonna put it around the wire that's going to the winch. Why? Because when I run the winch, the amps are gonna run to the winch, and this machine here is gonna count them. Now, keep in mind, this isn't stuck in any mud, we're just kind of freewheeling, and I secured it to a secure location on the other side of the shop, at least I hope, because we're gonna pull this forward, and as we pull this forward, watch right here on this dial. You can see here on the bottom, that's the scale we're looking at. Right below this 20 is 100 amps, right below the 40 is 200 amps. Now, I'm suspecting this thing dragging along in the shop floor should draw anywhere from 100 to 200 amps. So I'm gonna go ahead and run this, and you're gonna see the amps that it's actually gonna draw. Ooh, it's pulling it forward, drew about 200 amps, and that's just a freewheeling situation.
And that is a great snapshot for just how much of an amp draw there is on this entire system. So the next logical step, and possibly one of the most undone elements of a winch installation, is a new alternator. We told you our factory alternator, the OE, is about 80 amps. This is almost 120 amps. Big difference, very meaningful step, and you shouldn't forget this.
Now, before Brian installs that alternator, let's do a quick review. He said a little while ago, check what kind of alternator you have. Now, you may have one with a decoupler pulley. And what I did is I took a pick and I picked this top piece off right here, and I can look inside of here and I can tell it's gonna need some special tools to get that pulley off. A decoupler pulley is like another tensioner. It's like a belt tensioner, but it's built into the alternator for smooth operation. You might be asking, well, what does an alternator do? Well, it converts mechanical energy of the engine into electrical energy. It's actually an alternator, AC current. So what's happening is right here I have a cool little demo. If I spin this, the actual inside is the rotor assembly, and it's spinning around and it's inducing a voltage into the stator, which is out here, and it's putting an AC voltage. Now inside the alternator, you have a rotor assembly and you have a stator. So what's happened is it's spinning, it's magnetically inducing a voltage into here, which is an AC. It's three-phase AC. So then we have to go through a rectifier process, we have to go through a diode trio. Any one of these right here, we can cut those into half-wave rectification or full-wave rectification, come out the back, and guess what? Go into the battery. Now, an alternator, why we're discussing the internals of the alternator, is it only supplies what the battery needs. So think about this for a minute. We upgraded that alternator. And why did we upgrade that alternator? Well, if it has to work a lot easier, it's a lot less gas mileage, it's a lot less strain. There's a huge magnetic field. So you got a voltage regulator that senses the voltage that's going in and it changes it. It changes it to low voltage or high voltage and creates this huge magnetic field. And I have a cool demo here I can show you. I'm going to take this Optima battery, I'm going to hook this up and I'm going to create a magnetic field right here. Now each time I do that, I take that away, you see the spark. But this socket here, this weighs about a pound. This is a 1.25" socket. I'm gonna put that right here, and then I'm gonna magnetize that. You can see it's stuck. You can do it again, put it right there. Well, what does that mean to you? Well, think about that. That's a magnetic field spinning inside of that stator assembly. If that battery's starving for voltage, he's gonna ask that alternator for more, and more. Bigger, bigger, bigger magnetic field. The rotor's connected to the belt, the serpentine belt's driven by the engine, there's more gas mileage. You add accessories, whatever you put on the car, the more alternator draw, the harder it's gonna have to work. So that upgraded alternator is gonna do the job, and that's what we need for our application.
So after John's load test, I've disconnected the negative battery terminal so we can remove the original alternator. Now on the Jeep, very simple. There's a lower bolt and an upper bolt. Lower bolt's out. A couple turns I have this upper bolt out. And of course I release the tension on the serpentine belt so we can remove this. And there's just two connectors on the back of the alternator. Really couldn't be much easier. It's literally out with the old and in with the new high-performing, high-amp alternator. Goes right back in place. Real gentle here. I don't want to bend any brackets or break anything. I'm going to hang it with this upper bolt to get the weight off of it, and then I'll get the connectors back in place. All right, so the upper bolt's in. I've got the weight suspended. Make sure if it requires torque specs that you follow them. You want this alternator to be true and in place to get proper belt alignment, to get the maximum performance out of the alternator and not wear out your belt. Get the lower bolt back in. Now it's just two connectors on the back. I'll reconnect the negative battery cable. It's just that simple. Stay with us on Tech Garage. We'll be back.
Which circuit protection device resets and can be used again? A. Circuit breaker. B. Blade type fuse. C. Fusible link. Or D. Glass fuse. The correct answer is A. Cycling type circuit breakers reset automatically when the bimetallic arm cools once the current stops. This edition of Tech Garage, presented by Advance Auto Parts, is being brought to you by Dustless Blasting. It's the future of surface preparation. Custom Auto Sound, the originator of classic car OEM fit radios since 1977. Air Raid Filter, the performance intake company. And by Advance Auto Parts. Let's get you back to the garage.
Welcome back to Tech Garage, presented by Advance Auto Parts. Well, now it's time to turn our attention to the steering system, and more importantly, that death wobble. But before we do, let's take a look at this steering system. It all starts right here at the gearbox. Now, our gearbox is connected to the pitman arm, and the pitman arm's then connected here to a drag link. Now, the drag link comes down to this big old tie rod with tie rod ends on both sides, and in the middle here, you actually have a track bar that goes from one side to the other, and that's an important piece of the puzzle.
Absolutely. You know, the factory gave us one stabilizer here, but again, we're trying to reduce all the harmonics we can out of this system, so we're going to add a second stabilizer down here to the bottom. So if you can get the hammer and give me a little help here, I'd like to back this one out. Yep, one more. Good. All right. Out comes that stabilizer. I'm just going to transfer the bolt over into the top and get it reinstalled.
Now while you do that, what we're trying to do is we're trying to stiffen everything up. You can see here our track bar, it goes across all the way to each one of the spindles, and it's steady, it's stable. So our factory gave us one from the spindle all the way back to the track bar. We're going to add a second one. We're going to take one and we're going to go down here from the track bar, and we're going to come all the way up here to the tie rod end. When we come,
Huge difference.
That'll make a big difference because that's coming to the tie rod end. That's giving us a nice fixed point over here to where we can stiffen that up. And you can actually see that. If I go up and down with that right now, that's a big bar with a lot of play in it.
Absolutely. So we'll reinstall, tighten everything down and get a good mount in. This drops right down into the same channel. We're going to reuse the factory bolts. And I love the polyurethane bushings on these. Just beastie, which is great for the severe duty of this Jeep.
Absolutely is. Now, on our second one here, the service manual actually tells us to pull it all the way out. When we pull it all the way out, we want to mark the center of it. Well, why do we want to do that? Because we're going to put it up here. We're going to attach it, I said earlier, to the track bar over to the tie rod. And then when we get to the middle, I can go ahead and I can secure it down. And one of the most important things you can do is after we have this one secured down, is you want to get in when you're finished and you want to have a partner sit out front here and watch it, turn it left to right and make sure it doesn't overextend. Well, we'll get this buttoned up. You know, Brian, this Jeep's in good shape.
It's going to be awesome. You know what? I really do think I can get it stuck again.
Yeah, don't do that. Well, all we have left is the email question of the week.
John Thomas from Atlanta, Georgia has one of those aftermarket stereos and fancy amplifiers in his car with a few other accessories, but he's got to keep replacing the battery about every year. What do we advise Thomas?
Yeah, well, Thomas, that's a good question. You know, we upgraded the alternator on today's show. That may help, but batteries don't last forever. Batteries have lead plates inside. They're positive and negative lead plates, and through a chemical reaction, it'll charge your vehicle. But after time, Brian, what happens to these plates? You can see this just starts deteriorating and falling away like that. It's not going to last forever. Or you may have a parasitic draw, something that's drawn the battery down when it's not supposed to, a light bulb or other things. But it sounds like those amps and stereos doing a little damage to the battery. You might want to upgrade the alternator like we did.
One thing I can guarantee is our Jeep isn't going to have any electrical system issues.
No, not whatsoever. And that winch, we saw it pull that amperage. You're not going to have a problem with that alternator and that death wobble too.
Man, I wish I'd have had this thing before I had to call him.
I'll tell you what you need to do? I'll load it up. We'll take it with you this time. You can put that right in your receiver. No problem whatsoever.
Awesome.
Yep. For more about Tech Garage, follow us on Twitter. We're out of time for this week. From our garage to your garage. Thanks for watching Tech Garage.
Production assistance for Tech Garage is provided by Chipola College, located in Marianna, Florida. Founded in 1947, Chipola was recently ranked as one of the top 3 community colleges in the United States.